YouTube, this is kind of tough to say. I'm embarrassed, and I feel like as the bad boy of watches you've come to know me as, it's unlike me to apologize, but I just wanted to say that I had no idea Tudor released a new watch. And I think I should have known that because there's Hodinkee articles, Instagram posts, YouTubers talking about it, people giving their opinions. There's a back history that Watches of Espionage talked about. And it was like I was looking through my phone whenever Tudor FXD came up. And I think that's an issue with Tudor marketing and Tudor in general. And not only Tudor, but today we're going to focus on Tudor. What is up, Watch fam? My name is Michael. This video is sponsored by Harry's Razors. I just realized that is a funny oxymoron. I have no idea what that would be called. You may notice that Christian is not here. It's terribly sad, I know. He's in Italy curating watches, tasting the finest cuisines, driving on Vespas with beautiful women, throwing cigars into the mountains, and Christian is, he's in lack of a poetic way of saying it, Christian is on vacation until the 28th. It's the 19th today. So I'm probably going to I'm definitely going to cover the rest of September. Christian should be back in October. Just in time for Halloween. Quick wristwatch check. I got this watch from Huckberry. It is the Hamilton Pilot Pioneer. I wore the original when I photographed it for the Theo and Harris Watch Shop, which you can check out, which has a bunch of vintage watches curated by Christian himself. He sweats over these watches. They're absolutely beautiful. And I always liked that watch, and I love watches. I love to own a lot of watches, but what happens is I don't like to spend a lot of money, so then I never get the watches. Huckberry sent me this one. This is not sponsored by them. It's sponsored by the Oxymoron brand. But this Hamilton Pilot Pioneer is kind of taking the cake as my favorite watch, which is, it's not surprising because I always would look at photos of it, the pictures I took of my own wrist of it. But I have Rolex and Zenith. I really want a different vintage Omega that I'll tell you about one day. But this is really blowing me out of the water. It feels much more my style than a Rolex or a Zenith or anything at the moment. It'll probably change next week. But for now, absolutely love that watch. Couldn't love it anymore. It's impossible. Otherwise, I'd get arrested. But today, we're talking about the Tudor FXD a little bit. More importantly, we're going to talk about an issue that I have with Tudor and that Christian has had with Tudor for a very long time. And it's not a major issue, but it does get annoying, especially as someone that makes YouTube videos about this, because you start to see, or you start to think more about press releases and stuff like that. And I just think, and Tudor's not the only one at fault here, but I think a lot of watch companies, mainly Tudor maybe in this regard, but there's a lot of other ones, there's something I think would be really exciting, but they don't make it really exciting. And I think they may have made a little mistake this time promoting this watch. Not that they shouldn't, but the way that they did it, I think set up everybody to be let down. So we'll be getting into that today. Should be very exciting. And I would love to hear your thoughts on the FXD, or just really what you want to see from Tudor in general. I know for a fact that Tudor watches YouTube videos about Tudor like a hawk. So there's a good chance that if you write a comment or if you upvote someone's comment that you think Tudor should listen to, they will read it, which is kind of cool. I could also email them, but they're going to ignore that email. Okay, so I just want to say Tudor is one of my favorite brands. I think their watches are amazing. The Black Bay, the Pelagos, the other Pelagos, the other Black Bay, the other Black Bay, the other Black Bay was pretty sweet that Pelagos said they did, and the other watch that looked like the Pelagos. I love them all. I really do. I want a Pelagos 39 or Black Bay 54. I'm waiting till they roll out new colors, but fantastic brand, amazing value, and they're just rocketing ahead. So that is why they are the topic of discussion today. But before we get into a lot of details behind the scenes, let's talk about the new Tudor FXD in black. All we have to do is look at the videos everybody released last year about the Tudor FXD in blue and take away some things. So now the bezel is unidirectional, which is cool, which is fine, I think, for most people, probably appreciated. And the colors are black. I think that's it. There's probably something else that I'm missing, but I don't know what else it may be. But either way, that is the watch. It is a beautiful watch. It's a little too big for my wrist, but basically everything is too big for my wrist. That is why I'm sticking to the 39 or the 54. I will say I think Tudor crushes it and are continuing to crush the idea that watches can be a bigger size, but they're nicer when they're thinner. Even a 44 millimeter watch, while big and much too big for my wrist, if it was a 44 millimeter watch at 12 millimeters, I would probably prefer that over a 42 millimeter watch at 15 or 16 millimeters. So to me, it's all about a thin watch, obviously smaller, better for me, but thinness, I think, is really underrated. Either way, long story short, I don't have to be like, I love Tudor to say that this release is, it's boring. It's not even really a release. It could have been released alongside the other FXDs, no problem. Obviously, we also have the Red Bull FXD, which is cool. These are really just color updates besides the bezel change, which I do kind of agree you need to mention that somehow. You can't just be like, well, the blue one does and the black one doesn't, because that's a little confusing. But it's a boring release. The FXD is a great watch, not that exciting. Either way, Tudor is in a very unique position that very, very few brands are in, which is basically everything they are touching right now is turning to gold. In terms of the diver line, I would say their women's releases and their non-pure Black Bay line is probably doing just fine. But in terms of what is really just ripping for Tudor, obviously it's their diver line. And they're in a position where in September, they can just show us a black dialed watch, and all of a sudden that black dialed watch they probably paid Hodinkee, but it's on Hodinkee, it's on Bark and Jack. Bark and Jack is flying to Florida. Britt Pierce is talking about it. Theo and Harris is talking about it. I don't know who else is probably talking about it, but anyone that's talking about watches brings this up, and it goes nuts. And it's been Christian's biggest pet peeve for a while, because Tudor is very good at making a new color seem like a new watch, and I think that seems very beneficial front facing, like at just basic value, you're like, that's great. Everybody's talking about the watch again. Although I think long term, it sets a cycle of disappointing people on like a micro level, and then disappointing people that are reviewing things at more of a macro level that then kind of dribble that information down. The first issue is, and I know it's kind of like I am doing what I'm saying, but hopefully it's a little bit more than that. But the first issue is all these press people, all these publishers, they need to put something out, whether they're paid or not. We are not paid by Tudor, but it's news. People will click on it, so you want to talk about it. You want to talk with the community, but there's nothing to say. So you're kind of left talking about nothing. You're like, this is a watch that looks the same as the last one, and it has some cool history, and it's being used by Navy SEALs now, and this is a watch, and you're saying a whole lot of nothing. Hodinkee, I actually think, solved that, and that is kind of the conclusion of this video, which we'll get into in a second. But the other thing is the negative, which we'll touch on after I touch on all this stuff. This video is brought to you by Harry's. I still remember vividly the day my dad handed me a razor and said, it's time that you start shaving, you little hairy child. And I said, okay, sounds good. What I wish he said is, here is your Harry's razor. They have blades made in their own German factory that has been making blades for 100 years. And my son, my loving son, as much as I love you, I did get a great deal on these Harry's products that I want you to shave your face with, because we're getting factory direct prices from Harry's. They balance quality with affordability. In other blades, they're more expensive, but they're charging more because they can, not because they should. Don't you get that, Michael? My dad's shaking me as I'm, I don't know, 15 years old, however old I was when I started shaving. And then my dad would grab me really close and he'd say, Michael, the best part about this is there's no pink tax. So if women want to buy razors, they don't cost anything more than what we pay. And I say, that's amazing. Why don't they just buy men's razors anyway? And he'd say, I don't know, but saving money now is more important than ever. And then it would zoom back into me as a kid alone in my bathroom with lights around me, cautiously putting shaving cream on my face, because at the time I thought it was a little gross, but I rubbed my face with it and then I shaved and thought it was a miracle. And I really wish that I had Harry's at the time, because it would have made everything even better knowing that I was getting great prices. So if you're interested in Harry's, they have an amazing starter kit that they sent over to me. Everything feels great. Everything feels premium and luxury. They are made in Germany, and I couldn't recommend them more. So anyways, I highly recommend that you check out Harry's products. They feel great in the hand and even better on your cheeks, which is fantastic. You can check out the link in our description to get this $13 value for only $5. I highly recommend you try out Harry's. Thank you, Harry's, for sponsoring us. And I just realized I didn't start shaving with a razor until college, which I feel like is just many years past when most of you started shaving. So leave your shaving stories below and I'll make sure to read them all. All right, thanks, Harry's. At Tudor, I didn't see a massive rollout. They weren't teasing the FXD in black all that much, but they put out an Instagram clip that was teasing the watch, and it's still up. You can go watch it, and it's just saying something very exciting is coming from Tudor. I would say very exciting stuff does come from Tudor very often. In fact, more exciting stuff than most of the big brands that we're used to looking at, because Tudor is in that stage where they are kind of charging forward, being like, okay, this worked, that worked, this worked, so now we're going to make our movements and saying we're going to shrink the case, expand the case, change the color, change the bezel, make it like they're doing all of this stuff. Getting a legacy brand like Rolex to do a big change is kind of unbelievable. Rolex releasing a new watch and not an iteration of their lineup would be absolutely insane. You can even argue, okay, well, the 1908 was a huge Rolex release. Not really, it was kind of just a rebranding of the Cellini at the end of the day. So brands like Rolex aren't really doing anything that crazy. Tudor is, and I think probably they're slowing down now or will slow down a little bit and kind of look inside, change the movement, and then very cautiously start to introduce other things, all with the Black Bay, Pelagos, FXD, whatever it may be, in mind. The issue with that Instagram clip is that when people watch that clip and they see something exciting is coming from Tudor, this very aggressive brand, I would assume, and basing off the comments, I'm right, people assume way more than what they're getting. So they're like, oh my gosh, there's a new chronograph, it's a new GMT, maybe we're thinning some of the older watches that are too thick, new bracelets, whatever it may be. And then Tudor basically paints an FXD in black and puts it in the store. That's great. A lot of people were probably waiting for it, but it's just a color change. I wouldn't say that's a new revolutionary change, a new dramatic change. So you get disappointment from micro people commenting like, oh, cool, who asked for a black FXD? The answer is a lot of people. But when it was marketed in this way, it's like, okay, why are you making this so big? And then we go into videos like Britt Pierce's video where she says the new Tudor FXD release is meh. It's nothing crazy, because that's exactly what it is. It's just a mid-season color refresh to get Tudor back into the headlines, to keep that conversation going all year long. So I can't fault Tudor for releasing this press statement and this new watch. I think they should release an FXD in black. They're making basically an impenetrable wall of dive watches that makes them the de facto spectacular value dive watch brand. But the marketing, I think, is going to eventually start pushing out this idea that Tudor is not being as innovative as they are, that they're being lazy. Because while we had a bunch of huge releases, now we're just talking about color releases for the rest of the year. I have a proposed solution that could be interesting, but the real answer is that YouTube and press articles and stuff like that that aren't being paid for by brands like Tudor, like Bulova, like Oris, whoever it may be, they're driven off of what people click on, and people click on Rolex, Tudor, sometimes Grand Seiko, and then collection videos and stuff like that. So if you have a YouTube or Instagram or whatever it may be, and like Theo and Harris, for example, if we post a Rolex video, it does really well. If I post a video, if I come up with a topic that I think is really good, but it doesn't have to do with Rolex, it just bombs. All of a sudden you get stuck in this cycle of talking about three brands and kind of shrinking the conversation in general. And when you shrink the conversation in general that much, there's less and less to talk about. And then when there is nothing to talk about in the middle of the year and Tudor releases a new color, it's boring. And press that is not paid by brands is like, yeah, I don't know, I guess it's a boring release, so whatever. And I feel like that in general creates this kind of, like Britt said, meh idea that will slowly get into Tudor's bloodstream a little bit until the next release or something like that.
Straps, as many of you should know, bring a whole world of potential to mix up your watch collection. They breathe new life into watches. They help you pull out different colors. They give them new personality. Straps can be very addictive. I know people with 2 watches and 10 straps because it adds so many facets to a collection in a fairly easy and fun way. So that's why they become such a part of the Theo and Harris culture and identity. I think we sell more exotic straps than almost anybody because I just love them so much and I love sharing them with you.
all of that is to say, I think a slight pivot to the way brands market in mid-season, or even brands that are not Tudor, Rolex, Grand Seiko, who get their own marketing and have huge fanfare around them, could market, is through something more exciting. Hodinkee did a great example of this with the FXD. They went diving, they took photos of the watch underwater and talked about the diving history and stuff like that. And me, a seasoned, old, haggardy watch YouTuber, usually with a partner right here, I read the full article. I looked at all the pictures. I love that. That's not something you see in the watch world a lot. There's a tiny subreddit called Action Watches, which I go on all the time, and it just shows someone's wearing this Hamilton while they're flying a plane. Someone's diving with their Omega Speedmaster. Someone's doing something nuts. And I think that is the next level of marketing that the watch world should get into. And maybe it sounds dumb, but I just feel like if Tudor released the FXD with a 10-minute film, 20-minute film of people going diving, of if they can get a Navy SEAL talking about the watch and going diving, something like that, it would be incredible. And we would be reacting to more than just a black-dialed watch. We'd be reacting to the film, and then we would do what I really want to do, which is show people that watches, even though they're mainly luxury purchases right now, or I guess they are only luxury purchases really at this point, you could still use them for their tool factor. Seeing someone really beat up a watch and actually use a watch in a cool way from Tudor, I feel like is the next step. And the reason I think the storytelling aspect would work really well now, as opposed to even a few years ago, is because the watch community is way, way bigger than it ever has been before, I guess, since people were wearing watches all the time out of necessity. So now you have people that are willing to be engaged a lot longer. And it reminds me of college when we would talk about the cycle of technology versus media, and how, like when TikTok came out, for example, the content was basically bare nothing. And it started like films did in the 1920s. You have silent people that are just doing dances and showing stuff off. Then you have comedians come in with like really lowbrow humor. Then it gets niched, then it gets nuanced, and then it becomes a full packaged art form thing. Now TikTok, for example, is varied. There's tons of content. It's extensive. You can find cooking recipes and content that you actually like, and not something that appeals to just mass audiences. And I think as a watch community now, we are there because you have people like Teddy Baldessar, who is just reviewing watches. That is ground level. Everybody wants to see that. But then you have Britt Pierce, who would do detailed, like analytical things about the era of different watches and hip hop and watches and stuff like that. You have Nico Leonard doing, no offense, lowbrow humor as well, but in a different form, talking about celebrities. And I think it's all expanding to the point where brands can now put out actual documentaries and stuff like that that people would watch and be engaged about, and then that would suck people in. And of course Tudor can do it, Rolex probably won't do it, they could do it, but I think also brands like Bulova and brands that are not in the press as much can start doing that, and they would see an audience that they hadn't seen before. If they, of course, if it's marketed correctly on YouTube or on wherever, going the right direction. And that's not even, Christian and I make films for other brands, that's not even a plug for our stuff. I just think in general, the watch world, the watch media is surpassing the journalistic, let's just look at this device on our wrist stage, and they can do a lot more, and it would be really cool. So either way, that's my opinion. Tudor FXD is cool. I will get a Tudor eventually. The Pelagos 39 drops in light blue or dark green or something like that, I will probably be a customer. And I would love to watch a film like Rolex did in 1954 with the Italian divers or something like that. I think that'd be so cool. So anyways, that is it. That is the Tudor FXD. I hope you're all doing well. Christian is still in Italy. I miss him so much. So anyways, we're going to be riding together for a little bit more. Hopefully I can make it fun until he comes back. I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
Watches are unimportant to the time. They can't speed, slow, or stop it, and our phones tell it better. But as vessels for memories, they know few rivals.